The reviews are in for the new Tomb Raider, and I guess the Overton window of acceptable critical opinion is either to praise the movie and say it was good, or admit that, okay, the movie was terrible, but at least it wasn't as bad as those awful Angelina Jolie movies. Now, I don't know when this became conventional wisdom that those movies were terrible. The original Tomb Raider is a great action movie, and Angelina Jolie was fantastic casting and gave an incredible performance. I would say up there with the best female action hero performances ever. I guess Gal Gadot in Wonder Woman and Justice League, I'd say, is up there. Charlize Theron in Atomic Blonde, really great performance. And Uma Thurman in the Kill Bill movies. But Angelina Jolie was fantastic. People forget she was a great actress. She was in Girl Interrupted. She played the psychopath at a mental institution. She was great at that. So she's a great actress, had great range, and she was a great Lara Croft. So everyone kind of looking back on it and saying, oh, it was bad casting or bad performance, it's just not true. Now, Alicia, I do think it was a good choice. Obviously, I wish it was Gal Gadot, but I guess she can't do everything. Now, so I'm not putting any of the blame, about some of the blame, but most of the blame doesn't go on her. I think she was a good choice and gave a pretty good performance, but Angelina Jolie's performance is iconic and was better in every way. She had better attitude and better interactions with people, better chemistry, better emotional moments. Her moments with her dad in the original Tomb Raider are much better than the reboot, and way better action scenes and athleticism. So the big criticism is that she was sexualized. First of all, she wasn't as sexualized as people make it out. A lot of people make jokes about, her not being anatomically correct. They're way overblowing it. The scene with her in the short shorts, there was just one scene in the very first movie right at the start. She wasn't bearing her midriff. She did have form-fitting outfits, so definitely sexualized, but it wasn't as bad as people were making it out, and it never hampered her killing it in action scenes and seeming so fluid and so smooth. So in this new reboot, a lot of the critics are saying, well, it was such a visceral performance because she would grunt and that's true, but it also felt very clunky. I feel like it looked like she was struggling to pull off her action scenes. Angelina Jolie, it was just effortless the way she pulled off these stunts. So everything right down to the athleticism, which again is something people look back and say, well, it was just sexualized. She didn't have good athleticism. They didn't take her seriously as an action hero. No, they did take her seriously as an action hero. So Alicia's performance, you could say it was good. I don't think you could say it was iconic. Like I say, she did seem very determined and resilient, and I thought it was a great mix of that classy British elegance and a bit more of tomboyish, mischievous. And that brings me to my next point, where I get that this was kind of a prequel, kind of an origin story. She was supposed to be young, but major difference between this and the original Tomb Raider movies, this was a kid's movie. It wasn't really an action movie. It certainly wasn't an adult movie. It has such a light tone and such a kid's movie vibe that I feel like it's part of a broader trend now where you can't make any kind of big blockbuster action movie. It's increasingly more and more watered down and just kind of generic and just light tone. And I'm not sure why this is exactly. I think partly it is demand of audiences, and they say, look, this is gonna, when you make it appeal to everyone, even kids, like it's gonna sell the most tickets. And you know that, especially with these big franchises, the adults who love these franchises, well, they're gonna show up anyway. So you might as well, try to appeal to the younger people who don't have that same pull, make the movie appeal to them, and just on the brand alone, the adults will come. I don't know, but I do find movies like Suicide Squad, I don't think Suicide Squad was that great a movie, but just, the critics just hated it. And Batman vs. Superman, I thought quite a good movie. Again, negative critical response. Justice League, obviously, critics hated it. So you just see darker, more adult movies just getting driven out, and movies like Last Jedi, Thor Ragnarok, they're just so light, so goofy, and now even Death Wish that just came out, just very, very light. So all these movies now, and especially, like I say, there's a movie, Red Sparrow, came out, very dark and gritty, but that's not a franchise, that's not a blockbuster. So for me, it just seems like every single franchise, every single blockbuster is just getting taken over by these lighter elements. And I guess comparing the reboot to the original in terms of which is a better movie, I feel a little silly doing it, because to me, they're not even comparable. But I guess since I'm in the minority opinion, I'll try to justify it. So in the original, it opened with her fighting Simon, that awesome robot. Then you had the SWAT team type team invading her house, and she had a great action sequence swinging through her house on the kind of trapeze thing she had set up, riding the motorcycle, shooting the Uzi, hitting people with the motorcycle. And then you had her go into the first tomb, and I remember her jumping on that battering ram type thing, that booby trap. So you had all of that within maybe the first 45 minutes of the movie. Compared to the new one, you had her getting choked out in the kickboxing ring and then having a bike chase. That was basically first 45 minutes. Those were kind of what happened. And if you say, well, the first one had all this cool action, but this one had better characterization, better characters, better character dynamics, better plot. No, it didn't. This one had, the plot in the original wasn't particularly great. It was a pretty thin plot, but there was way more plot than in this one. This one had no plot to speak of. She finds out where her dad went and goes and looks for her dad. And then there's a tomb there, and that's about it. And the central father-daughter dynamic, very similar in this one to the original, and I think was a little better done in the original. The characterization in this one was terrible. It was her. I guess her dad, the villain, got a bit, but most of the other characters were just cameos that kind of popped up for about 10 seconds, which I guess could hint to maybe future things if we get more movies. But as far as the actual characters we got fleshed out in this, barely any, way better in the original. And great villains. The villain really so in this one. In the original, I remember the villain at one point, he had all his henchmen and the spear's coming towards, and he just grabs a henchman and just puts him into the spear. So just those great villains, moments you remember, and great iconic moments. Even the ending of the original, where she comes down and is all classy wearing the hat, and then there's a thing on the silver platter, and it's her double guns, and there's a new improved robot. Just these great moments that I remember. I'm not really gonna remember any moments of this reboot other than being very disappointed in it. And I feel like what it really does come down to is understanding the genre you're in and what makes it great. So in the original, she was in this mansion, and you had all this elegance and opulence and old books, and it worked so well with why people like archaeology and like going into these tombs, and why the idea of raiding tombs and finding these priceless artifacts, it's so interesting. They understood that unique vibe of the genre. And also in the original, when they're in the tomb and then they disturb something and all these creatures in the tomb come to life, again, it's that mixing of the old and the antique with also ancient myths and ancient mythologies. And we got a bit of that. I think where this new one was the strongest was when they were fleshing out the mythology of that Queen of Death. I think that was where it was at its strongest. But it's just been done so much better in Indiana Jones, The Mummy even, or the original Tomb Raiders. So they understood at like the most superficial level, yeah, you need a mythology, you need booby traps, but as far as really understanding what makes people love this tomb raiding genre, I don't think they understood it at all. And then comparing the reboot to the second one, Cradle of Life, the second one wasn't as good as the original, I found, but still much better than the reboot. Just the ambition of it, they had so many different sets and locations. Like, it really had this jet-setting, globe-trotting feel where they'd go around to all these different locations. The reboot had 3 locations and none that were that great. So they went to all these different locations. She was skidooing and she was deep sea diving, and there were spear guns. She rode a shark at one point. She was horseback riding at her mansion and shooting targets. There was just so much going on. They jumped off of a building and they had the flying squirrel suits, and there was just so much going on, and not all of it worked. But if you look at it as a movie, like, what am I going to want to watch again? A movie with so much going on, so much ambition, and a great mythology. There was a great mythology in the second one, talking about how that Pandora's box and dualities of life, and how the origin of life, there would also be an accompanying plague. Just so much good stuff. I do think Gerard Butler, I remember he was in the second one, Cradle of Life, and I think he was either miscast or I didn't like his performance. I didn't really like him in it that much. And the overall look of it, there was just kind of a dreary, ugly look that I felt the whole movie had, and it got kind of just oppressive and hard to watch at times. So I definitely didn't like the second one as much as the original. I think the original is just a great action movie, flat out. No asterisks, no great video game adaptation, no good for a Tomb Raider movie. No, first Tomb Raider is just a good action movie. So for all the people saying this is so much better than the original Tomb Raider movies, I don't understand what metric they're really using, except for if you say, look, on gender politics, because she's less sexualized, it's a better movie. I get that, for sure, 100%. But by any other metric, as far as being a good Tomb Raider adaptation, like true to the source material, as far as being a good action movie, as far as being a good archaeologist Tomb Raider movie in that genre, the originals are just far better, in my opinion. And then, as far as there being the video game adaptation curse, I think it's overblown, because like I say, I think the original Tomb Raider is a great movie. I think Hitman wasn't great, but I think Hitman was a good movie for sure. So I think that adaptations in general are always going to be a little disappointing. And I do think probably the people adapting video games, they've probably played the game and they probably understand the video game they're adapting even less than a lot of the people who are adapting, let's say, a book. Sometimes I think they don't have a great understanding of the book either. Maybe they haven't really read it or really understood it themselves, but I think they probably have better comfort level and understanding than I think anyone who's adapting a video game, who I don't think a lot of the directors who make these kind of movies, I don't think they're gamers. So I do think that video game adaptations, they might be slightly less worse quality and they might slightly less authentic to what they're adapting, but I don't think it's like a full-blown curse. If it is, the curse is still on, because this one I don't think was bad. But again, I think this was bad for other reasons. I don't think this was bad for anything to do with it being a video game adaptation. It was just not a good movie.